context of this whole discussion, and I want to make this very interactive. I hate PowerPoint slides as much as I can, but I want you to be interacting with me, asking questions if there are any. Interrupt me. Feel free to interrupt me. What I've seen in the last almost 10 years, if not 20, is the evolution of the context and the usage of data. 2008 prior, data was an asset which was an afterthought, right? I mean, organizations would build data warehouses and do not know what to do with it. I mean, every company, every CIO, every CDO, well, CDO role never existed at that time, but every CIO or a CTO, yeah, we need a data warehouse, right? What was the genesis and the purpose and the why of a data warehouse was not really clear. And I was building data warehouses at that time too. It was serving food to my table, but I had no clue why am I doing those table designs, why am I building those data structures, why am I doing ETL, why am I doing reports. So data always was an asset before 2008. 2008 onwards, when the financial crisis happened, the regulatory, and especially this is a banking space, but then this applies to any industry. The banking and the financial services, government came pretty hard on having access to the information that the banks preserve about customers. So a lot of regulations on reporting, a lot of regulations on the capital adequacy reserve. How many here in the audience understand the CCAR, Basel, CECL processes? So CCAR is basically a cumulative capital adequacy reserve. What that means is, in simple layman terms, every bank, every loan that every bank or a lending company will have to provide you for mortgage or a house or a credit card, they have to derive or predict a reserve in their books and let the government know that even if the banks and the market crashes, the loan can be funded for next 3 years, and they will not be coming to the government for help. That's called the capital adequacy reserve. In simple layman's terms, I mean, there's a much more complex definition to it. And CECL is basically the equity loss ratio. So you have to predict, the bank has to predict for every loan what is the loss adequacy ratio that they have to maintain. Now, these calculations need a lot of data from a loan, not just internal data, but external market data as well. So that was the focus 2008 to now. But with the new administration, the new government, with the ease of regulation on the banks, and in the last 10 years, many banks, foreign banks, exited the US market because of these regulations, because the transparency was pretty much exposed. It was hard to operate in the US market because of a lot of money has to be spent on maintaining that data. So point I'm trying to make is, for last 10 years, that has been the focus. But now that the regulations are a little easy, now that the regulations are a little bit easy, banks and financial services and other insurance companies are now focusing more on the customer growth. So they now are back to using data for getting insights, understanding their customers, understanding their products, understanding the market. The growth of the data, the velocity, variety, and the veracity, and the market change dynamics, that's the foundation of why we need to rethink about our data careers. The volume of data and the Hadoop platforms and the distributed platforms of Cloudera and Hortonworks, how they can store and compress large amount of data, how you can analyze, how the tools and the technologies can actually process large amounts of data. We have to evolve from what we've been doing in this career. I mean, I personally, I have 3 kids, mashallah, 2 boys and a girl. I personally am very involved in actually making sure that my kids, my kids are looking at these careers in the future. So I'm going to tell you what I tell my kids too. I mean, my kids are learning Python in school. It is a language which you have to learn I think it's a must-learn language for our kids. If not you, you've got to go back at home and actually tell your children, with English, French, and Mandarin, learn Python. And it sounds funny, but it is true. I mean, it is a very English-like language. It's very easy to implement. And these kids, when they come out of college, imagine the starting salary, at least in Ernst & Young, is about $75K for a staff. If they can do a very advanced Spark Python code, 45, 50-year-old brother sitting here doing Python and demanding 125K is not going to work. So rethink about your careers. I mean, I personally urge, Brother Danish sitting here, he and I have spoken about this at conferences in ISCJ. Brother Kamral knows I'm very passionate about this. I mean, you have to do something about it. Otherwise, we will be obsolete. So the changing shift of data is where the key landscape is. The whole digital world that we're living in these days, I mean, you hear a lot of digitization, transformation of business from traditional to digital world. The data structures behind those digital architectures is entirely different from what we are used to now. The data structures is much more agile, much more demanding, much more ad hoc. So you've got to look at the why and the purpose and the mission of data more closely now than ever before. The processes within an enterprise data organization is also the governance, the architecture, the security, and the process improvement is changing as well. So if you change the why of data, your processes within enterprise data management has to change as well. Because now the authoritative sources that you need for regulatory, which is much more governed and controlled, you may have to ease that a little bit, because if you just rely on that data, you don't have enough customer information to be able to drive insights. So you need to open the source mouth a little bit bigger, because data lakes can actually absorb and ingest much more. And when you talk about data strategy, here are the steps that every CDO will now have to sort of enable themselves with. They've got to change their operating model. They've got to change how they interact with the line of businesses. They've got to change how they interact with their finance function, the risk function, the operations function, the customer function. They have to evolve their operating model. They can't be sitting there and taking requirements and come back after 6 months when the warehouse is ready. The businesses are demanding data every 2 weeks. The CCAR and the CECL risk modelers need data every 2 weeks to be able to polish their data models, polish their statistical models, and come up with a new adequacy reserve. The supply chain has to change. The sourcing of data has to change. It's no more regulatory where a small amount of data was enough. It's much more broader now. The skills will have to change. I mean, the way you do ETL now will change to totally different. I mean, Hadoop, Scoop, and Python Sparks are the way to do ETL, no more Informatica and Ab Initio and those tools. It's much more real-time than ad hoc and batch. The roadmap of evolving that architecture change has to change as well. So this slide, I show it to every chief data officer or chief information officer I go and talk to. This one slide takes about 45 minutes to an hour. That's just one page. I mean, there's no more decks I carry with me. I just take that page. It's enough to scare them and sign an SOW. So that's what I carry in my back pocket. I mean, this is the new way of doing data within an organization.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you go back to the previous slide? You said about AI and machine learning, and I pretty much work on that environment. I would like to see, when you talk about AI and machine learning, it seems to be not, I'm not sure, but you have to explain to me on this. Is this a real-time data can be used in this environment? Because if you talk about machine learning, it's a natural language understanding, it's a natural language processing. So it's like feeding the computers what you want the output to be. So when it comes to real-time data, like you said, banks and transactions, how do you see this environment as? Because as of now, I'm not sure that is achievable, but I would like to get your idea on this.
That's a great question, sister. And I'm glad somebody is paying attention. So artificial intelligence and machine learning is a word that is tossed a lot these days. Machine learning has nothing to do with the frequency of data, right? Machine learning is about learning the process, and data is an ingredient of that process. So I absolutely agree with you. You don't have to feed real-time data into machine learning. You have to feed enough rich data for the machine to learn the process. So the direct correlation between the machine learning, natural language processing code, and the process is important. The data becomes a bridge between those two. Does that answer your question? Right. So you're right. I mean, but if you have access to real-time data and you can feed that real-time, even then the machine learning servers and the machine learning technologies are not capable enough to handle that real-time data, by the way. Right? So for example, if you're telling a student, so machine learning is a server or a code is like a student. If you're telling the student to learn chapter 1, you can't feed chapter 2 at the same time. Does that make sense for everybody? So machine learning and data has no relationship. Machine learning and process is where the link is. Data is an ingredient for the machine learning to understand the process. It doesn't have to be real time.
But the question comes up as, see, in the machine learning itself, we come to an area called deep learning.
Yes.
Wherein, see, now the situation, I'll give you chatbot as an example, which I'm working on. Here the question is, most of the area when we go down, people ask questions and we don't want a human to be present 24/7 to answer those questions. In such cases, we employ a chatbot. So in that case, it is necessary for an IT professional. Imagine if it is an IT chatbot. We need an IT professional to feed in that data because you need the chatbot to replace you in case. In that case, what happens is the chatbot does what is called, we want it to do a deep learning. So that we don't want this chatbot to be replaced by a human. Otherwise, you have to be queued up with questions so that a human has to answer. So in that case, what happens is deep learning is repetition, so that the system understands what would be the innovative question which will come from the customer. So in that case, there is a relationship because the data which I inputted is from the logs from what I had been focused and questions with.
Yes.
So that is the real-time data which I'm feeding into the machine. So these real-time data, as far as an IT is concerned, it could be a repetition.
Yeah.
But as far as a banks or a transaction is concerned, it is always a real-time statistic. How do you relate it with that?
Right. So the concept of deep learning, first of all, you should give me a resume. We'll have you in a practice. The concept of deep learning is, again, I mean, and these questions get challenged to us a lot. The word deep and a chatbot to understand the process is the richness of data, not the frequency of data. So if you, again, and I push back hard to our clients. The client says we need to feed the data every second. Yeah, but the point is to be, for the bot to be intelligent, you've got to feed a richer set of data, not a frequent set of data. So I'm okay feeding the bot every hour. That's not real time. That's near real time. But what I'm feeding every hour has got to be 2,000 data elements versus 20 data elements. Feeding 20 data elements every second may not solve the problem, may not make the bot smarter. Feeding 2,000 elements deeper at the lowest grain, in the transaction grain, every 1 hour is what makes the bot smarter. Does that answer your question? Okay, but I'll need a resume. So that's pretty much is the new, I mean, if the CDO says, what do I do? How do I go back and make a purpose for an EDM organization? That's what we share. I won't go deeper into this, and depending on how much time I have. But the usage of data is two-pronged now. I mean, coming from the same genesis of the consumption of data. The regulatory purpose of consumption will still remain. I mean, those reporting and information sharing with the government and the feds and the regulators have not gone. It has a lesser focus now, but they still exist. But the second stream of consumption, which is much more analysis, insights, much more ad hoc, much more real time or near real time, Like the line of businesses need to run their operations. They cannot wait for a dashboard or a report to come back in 6 weeks to them. So, and they cannot wait for just to summarize data as well on a good looking Tableau dashboard. It's those analytics and discovery and analysis, those consumers are much more challenging now. So the CDO, the Chief Data Officer, will have to worry about them in addition to worrying about the reg consumption. The last slide I want to view, and this is a very busy slide. This is one of my favorite slides this team created here. So the orientation of this slide is, this is a role of a Chief Data Officer which is evolving now. They have to manage risk, they have to enhance their internal operations, they have to be competitive, they have to provide information to the line of businesses to be competitive, and they have to make sure that the client excellence. Client excellence is, the client of a Chief Data Officer are the product managers, the line of business managers, the risk officers, the finance officers, the operations officers, the Chief Customer Officers, the Chief Digital Officers. Those are their clients. So the role of a CDO is evolving. Now keep in mind, the evolution of skills is changing as well. So